Alright, guys, so today the stuff we're going to be talking about could be discussed for many hours, but instead we're going to be doing a lot of abbreviating, try to keep things as concise as possible. As always, there will be timestamps in the description if you want a table of contents, or if you want to see what the video entails, or if you want to jump around. I'm going to be hitting BDO pretty hard in this video. So before we do that, a quick word about the developers. BDO is a one-of-a-kind game. I don't think there will ever be another game quite like it. I have a lot of memories from this game that are going to stick with me for a long time. And, despite all the criticism that you're going to hear from me today, I am genuinely thankful for those experiences and for those memories. And, you guys have heard me make comments like the devs don't play the game or the devs don't care about the players. Those are broad statements that are made out of frustration, and I don't think it's fair to speak that broadly about the entire dev team. In reality, Perlibis is a huge company now. I think there are more than 100 devs working on just BDO alone, could be even higher than that now. And I do believe that some of these devs are putting in the absolute bare minimum. Like, some of the stuff is inexcusable. But it's also clear that some of the devs are continuing to really pour their heart into this game despite all its problems. I had a chance to meet some of these guys in person when I visited Korea, and I got the sense, even though they're too polite to say it directly, I definitely got the sense that many of the people who work at Perlibis, many of the devs who actually love the game, share the same frustrations that we have as players. So let's just try to keep in mind all of that as we go forward. And, if any of the developers are listening, if you're somebody who does love this game and you are putting your heart into it, thank you. I hope you continue to work on it, and I hope you find the way forward. So let's get to the question that I've been getting constantly: are you quitting BDO? Mostly yes. The reason I say mostly is because I'm not trying to make some grand statement about how I'm never going to log into the game again. This game was a big part of my life for a really long time, and I will probably still visit. I'll probably still hop on every once in a while and do like a node war with my friends or something like that. Um, I built my channel on BDO, and I think at this point that I've streamed the game longer than anyone else on Twitch. So, yeah, I just don't have a desire to log into the game on a regular basis anymore. That's really what it comes down to. And I felt like this for a long time. Too many of my streams from the past year or more have consisted of logging into BDO, trying my best to find something fun, running into the problems that we're going to be discussing in this video, getting frustrated, and then wishing I was playing something else. It hasn't been fun for me. It hasn't been fun for you guys to watch. And I'm tired of constantly putting out this frustrated, negative energy to my audience. So this is something I should have done a long time ago. I've been afraid of leaving the game because of the financial risk. I don't know if I'm, stable enough to swap games or swap careers or um, whatever this entails. We'll talk about that a little bit more at the end of the video. But nonetheless, I'm worn out, and I'm sure you guys are worn out from watching me be worn out, so we are moving on. There's lots on the horizon, and I need to find a game that invigorates me and motivates me to put to put out quality content like I used to be known for once upon a time. I'll talk again a little bit more about that at the end of the video, but for now, let's talk about why I'm leaving BDO. Here's the list as short as I could make it: easily avoidable design flaws, tedious chores disguised as content, fun prevention for no reason, premature announcements that lead to unkept promises or rushed dead on arrival content, neglecting or outright ruining systems that were or could be actually great, greedy monetization, creating problems just to sell solutions, hidden stats, and lack of quality control. Those are actually two separate issues, but they tie closely together, so we're going to discuss them together. Incessant desync and other issues with PvP. Enhancing and in-game progression desperately needs an overhaul. Perlibis doesn't stop cheating, and neither does the community. And finally, ineffective partner program. So I'm gonna hit each of these points and spend a couple minutes on each. But before we do that, I want to kind of take a deep dive into one particular system. because I think it demonstrates multiple of the things that I'm talking about and how all this is connected. This video is going to be kind of like a web of different connected ideas. And so, at times it's probably going to feel like I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but if you stick with me, I think you'll see how it's all connected. It is difficult to talk about any of these things in isolation because, problem A affects problem B and problem B affects problem C and D, and it all kind of blends together in this big mess. But we're going to try to parse that as best we can. And I think the best example to start off with to describe some of these issues is horse breeding. So, horse breeding was one of my favorite systems when I first started playing BDO. I think when the game first came out, there was like 5 tiers, and you would go out in the wilds, and I think maybe tiers 1, 2, and 3 were available in the wild, and so you would mostly be catching tier 1 and 2, but every once in a while you'd catch a tier 3. There was this really good system that was kind of a combination of a little bit of luck, a little bit of preparation, a little bit of grind. Um, and a little bit of discovery as well. There was this system based around the different breeds of the horses where, if you wanted to eventually breed your way to getting like the pure white horse who's the fastest or the pure black horse that had kind of the best like rounded stats overall, you would look for certain horses in the wild and you would breed certain colors of horses together so that you would hope for a certain outcome. And so there was this whole like interesting system and mini game and community around horse breeding. And they eventually released T6s, which were a little bit better, and there were some skills that you started to get around T5, T6 that would make your horse sprint, or skills like drift and instant excel that would allow you to go around corners or get these bursts of speed. And then eventually that led to T7s and T8s. We started to get skills like double instant excel, and it was a pretty good progression. And the color scheme kept growing, and you would start by nowadays you can only catch up to T5 in the wild, and so you would look for certain T4s or T5s. You would breed those into the right T6. Once you got the right T6s, you would breed those into the right T7s. And it was a lot of work, but it was very rewarding. You got excited when you got the result that you wanted. You were bummed out when you got the result that you didn't want, but you kind of understood the risks and what the odds were and like what you were working towards. And it was overall like it was a really satisfying system. And so then they come out with the T9 horse system. And the T9 horse system feels like somebody who never played BDO before was suddenly hired at Pearl Abyss and was told to make T9s, and they had no idea or no interest in the previous system at all, and kind of just deleted the whole thing. Like, none of the stuff that you did from tier 8, from tier 1 to tier 8 matters at all for your tier 9. The only thing that matters is that your tier 8 has a certain set of skills, and the only way that you can guarantee that you get those skills is a cash shop reroll item. So there again, we have greedy monetization and creating problems just so that they can sell the solution. So we have them neglecting an old system that used to be really good. You're starting to see all these things tied together. The tier 1 through 8 system, completely forgotten, completely neglected. All the work that you did no longer matters. The color of your horse no longer matters, the breed, etc. And what does matter to get a T9 are these sort of random activities that don't have anything to do with horse breeding. You get the materials from things like fishing or farming. And, I can kind of see what they were going for there. Like, it's not the end of the world if you have to do life skill A in order to get materials for life skill B. Like, they want some interconnectivity there, and that's fine. But just the fact that they completely threw away the entire 1 through 8 system, which was actually interesting, and replace it with the T9 system, which is basically you go and buy materials off the market because most of them are too rare to actually farm yourself anyways, and you kind of just like throw a combination of in-game money and real-life money at it, and then eventually you get the T9. Very boring, very uninspired, really disrespects the old system. And the crazy thing about T9s is that the T10 system that came afterwards is like 100 times worse. Like, I didn't think it could be possible for a system to let's just go over the T10 system for those of you who aren't familiar with it, and I'll kind of explain what I'm talking about here. So you go through the system of getting your T9, you awaken your dream horse, And then a couple years later, they come out with this T10 system. And the T10 horses are really cool. Like, I don't have a problem with the horses themselves. The horses themselves are amazing. It's the process of getting the horse that drives me crazy. Um, so for a T10, first of all, you need a male and a female T9. So you have to go through that process a second time, which, wasn't really enjoyable to go through the first time. But then in addition to that, let me bring up this little chart here, and we'll go through the materials you need to make a T10 horse. So these are all the ingredients that you need to make a T10 horse. Most of these, again, have nothing to do with horse breeding. You basically just buy them off the market. There's nothing really interesting happening there. For this one, the mythical powder, we have a bunch more market stuff that you just buy. And then we have Flower of Oblivion that you get from Imperial Horse Delivery. This is basically the only part of the T10 system that actually has to do with horses. So the way you get this flower is by delivering lower tier horses, and you get this in exchange. So you get like T5s and T6s that you catch or breed or whatever. You turn them into the horse guy. He gives you the flower. And it's not really the most like interesting or creative system, but at least it actually has something to do with horse training. So that part is, okay. Now, this next part here is a weekly quest, which they eventually added a daily version of as well, that just completely time gates your progress towards the T10. So you can do this quest once a week. It gives you 30 of these. You need a total of 100. Based on your horse training skill, you can then do a daily to get between 1 and 4, I think, depending on how high your skill is. So you have a arbitrary time gate for no reason on this new horse, and I'll talk a little bit more about why that matters in a second. But on top of the time gate from the weekly, if you want to catch up with that at all, if you want to get more attempts, you now have to do the daily on top of that. The daily is go catch a horse of a certain tier. Not a very interesting task. Pretty tedious to have to go out of your way. You have to go to Stonetail Horse Ranch, which is out in the middle of nowhere, and talk to this NPC, and then go catch a horse of the right tier. If there's no horses of the right tier on your channel, you have to swap to a different channel and look around for another horse. Very tedious, very boring, very like mobile gamey. I don't know what the point of this is other than to just waste the player's time. The horses that you're catching for this, for the most part, are not relevant for any of the current content. Like, people aren't out catching T2s and T3s as part of their normal breeding. If you are catching wild horses, you're doing T4s and T5s, and you're doing it in a completely different part of the map that's not anywhere near Stonetail Ranch. So you're basically going out of your way, wasting your time doing a task that you would never do because you have to, because it's your chore. And there's no other way to get these ferns. Now, this next item here, Old Moon Sensor, is, again, all just stuff that you buy off the market. Not interesting, not challenging, not compelling. And then we have the Mythical Feather. And there's two ways of getting this. The first is to turn in Brilliant Fairy Wings, which is sort of like the item that I guess they didn't really know what else to do with. So they had to turn it in for Mythical Feathers. The Brilliant Fairy Wings used to be used to like spawn your fairy, or to try to get, like, there's this whole fairy system that I'm not really going to get into, but it's T1 through T4, and you would use these fairy wings and basically gamble and try to get a T4. And the fairy system itself is just weighed down with a bunch of constant like cash shop nonsense and really like greed when it comes to getting the right skills. And it's a whole nother system of the game that I could go into with just as much depth as the horse system and just pick it apart. But, this is already going on long enough. So most people by now already have their fairies, and so these fairy wings just kind of pile up in their bank, and so they were like, just make it a T10 material. What else are we going to do? Now, the other way to get the Mythical Feather is from Lachiaro, and this one hits me close to home, because Lachiaro, we're going to go on another tangent, talking about, old neglected systems that used to once be great. Man, is there anything that is more neglected than Lachiaro? When it first came out, it was this super high skill ceiling, like excellent way of making money. It was a hard game to learn. It was hard to get good at, but if you actually took the time and understood the rules and practiced and got so you could solve the puzzles quickly, you could basically go around finding these open world mini games where you dig up this route, and the faster you do it, the more money you make. And if you make any mistakes, you lose a ton of money. So you have to be good at the game. You have to have a fast horse so you can go around finding these. And it was a really cool like side activity in the game, a really cool system that rewarded you for practicing and for being for learning the game and solving it quickly. So Lacchiaro since then has fallen way out of relevance. They haven't updated it at all. It's completely neglected. It's basically pointless to do now. You can do other activities in the game that are 2, 3, 4 times more valuable than Lacchiaro and way less effort, like way less skill needed. So there's no point to ever do a Lacchiaro unless you're like literally just doing it for fun. So this is a solution to that, right? Lacchiaro's been neglected for a long time. They bring it back into relevance by making mythical feathers be part of the T10 horse system. Wrong. The drop rates for getting one of these from a Lacchiaro is essentially zero. You can only get a mythical feather from stage 4 and stage 5 Lacchiaros. Stage 4 and stage 5 Lacchiaros are very rare. Stage 5 is something between 1 and 2%, and stage 4 is probably around like 5%, I'm just guessing. But on top of the actual stage 4s and stage 5s themselves being very rare, your rate of getting a mythical feather from solving one of those it's got to be less than 1% based on my experience. I mean, I've solved a ton of stage 4 and stage 5 Lacchiaros since this was introduced to the game, and I've never once seen one of these feathers. So even if the mythical feather was a 100% drop rate on stage 4s and stage 5s, you're still talking about dozens and dozens of hours a week just to keep up with the time gated fern route, like just to be able to make your horse attempts once every couple weeks or so. And it's not 100% drop rate. It's like 1% or less, which means there is no amount of time you could possibly spend on Lacchiaro that would actually give you any meaningful amount of mythical feathers. Like you would spend months and months and months doing nothing but Lacchiaro all day, every day, before you would even get one attempt at a horse. So, I mean, there's so many different things that I mentioned that this blends into. You know, it's a easily avoidable design flaw. They could simply just increase the rates. The ferns themselves are tedious chores. Most of these things that they're adding into the game as materials are just kind of uninspired. They're not interesting. Nobody put any thought into this, and the best part of this whole system is that once you do all this, once you buy all this stuff on the market, once you go do your tedious dailies, once you buy your mythical feathers off the market as well, because there's no way you can get enough Lacchiaro or enough fairy wings to actually sustain your attempts. Because of the time gate, you get to it. If you're hardcore, you get to attempt this about once every 2 weeks. Now, the odds of succeeding are 3%. And when you fail, you do not gain any additional increase to that. It just stays at 3% forever. Now, if you were to graph the results of the player base going for T10s, we did the math on this. I'm gonna get it wrong. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's something like a small number of people, 10 or 20%. Are going to get this thing if they stay on top of it and they do their chores. They're going to get this thing within the first month or two. The average player would get it in something like a year and a half, and the bottom 30% of people, you're looking at 2 years, 3 years, three years of doing the same tedious horse mission in the middle of nowhere every single day, not missing a day, before you finally see results to all your work here. If you're in the bottom 10%, I think it's like 5 years of weekly attempts or bi-monthly attempts, whatever you want to call it. Did anyone ever stop and just think about that? Did anyone ever stop and just run the numbers behind that. I mean, it's sort of unfathomable to me. Um, it seems so easy for someone to just sit and look at that and be like, huh, maybe we should add a fail stacking system, or maybe we shouldn't time gate this behind the ferns. Maybe we should just allow people to go and play the game and get rid of the daily part. And, if they want to spend all day gathering these materials and they want to make 10 attempts in one day, and they want to spend the resources to do that, why don't we just let them? I don't know. I don't know. It's this weird, it feels like this weird mobile game mentality to me, where it's like everything is based around dailies now, and that's how they artificially inflate their retention or their daily active users for their shareholder report. Or I don't know what sort of weird incentives they have going on behind the door that lead to systems like this, but it is nothing short of an atrocity. I really was so excited for T10s. This is one of the few things that actually got me hyped to play BDO again recently. And when I saw the details of this, I mean, it just makes you never want to log in again. So I've gone on my T10 rant. Let's go down and talk about the actual bullet points of these other things that I mentioned now. The first thing I mentioned at the beginning of the video was easily avoidable design flaws. Now, when I talk about this, I am not talking about complicated things like class balance. Some of that stuff is always going to be hard. It's always going to be subjective. You're never going to get it right. Some players are going to think you're going to do a good job. Some players think you're doing a terrible job. You're never going to make everyone happy. That's not the stuff I'm talking about. I'm talking about low-hanging fruit, brain-dead stuff that should take 5 minutes to fix. So I have a list here. The first thing on the list is T9s and T10s, which we already went over. The second thing on the list is energy of Lacchiaro. So I got to circle back to Lacchiaro. There is this item that you get from Lacchiaro, which is kind of like the mythical feather. It has I believe, I don't know, a 1 in, I don't want to say exactly what the number is, but it's 1 in a way too much chance of getting this item. I have done hours and hours and hours of Lacchiaro. I don't know how many hours, dozens of hours, maybe hundreds of hours of Lacchiaro, and I have 1 of these. What is this item? Well, if you get 100 of them, you get a dim tree spirits armor, which is worth 200 or 300 mil, depending on your server, which is equivalent to less than 1 hour of grinding or gathering or really doing anything else that makes decent money nowadays. So, in other words, it's a useless item with essentially a 0 drop rate that doesn't really do anything. You're never going to get 100 of these, no matter how many Lacchiaros you do. The number 1 Lacchiaro player in the worlds, who literally does nothing but Lacchiaro all day and has thousands of hours, is nowhere close to getting 100 of these. There was no reason to ever put this item in the game. How hard is that to fix? Just go increase the rate. Or don't make the rate so absurdly low to begin with. Anyone who's remotely familiar with Lacchiaro, anyone who actually has done that content would know that this is an unattainable item, and that you're just wasting your resources, you're wasting your dev time by adding this to begin with. And the next thing I have is muskets and axes. So this is a good one. BDO, the game with by far the best combat of the MMO genre. That's the thing that makes the game shine above all else. What's a way that we can make the best combat in the game even more interesting? I know. Let's completely lock people out of all their skills, force them to unequip their weapons, and instead put on this axe that they can only basic attack with. And this is the best way to destroy structures in PvP. So when you're doing high-end PvP, when you're doing sieges and node wars in this game, this is the end game right here. This is what somebody thought was an improvement to BDO's combat. You're actually bad if you wipe your opponents and you don't do this. If you continue using your regular attacks on their structures, you're enting. You have to do this instead. Crazy. I don't know who asked for this. I don't know who wanted this. Literally, when it came out, everyone in the player base said, "Stop it! Don't do that. Get rid of that." And yet, it remains. The karma system. The karma system in this game, very, very easy to fix. And the devs, have made very, very bizarre statements on it. Right now, if you fight someone in BDO and you flag up for PvP and you kill them, you lose a chunk of karma. And if you lose too much karma, your character goes red, and then you have significantly increased penalties for dying. Now, nothing happens to the person you're killing. They just spawn 10 to 30 seconds away and they can come right back. And you're basically, you take the penalty as the killer. They don't take any penalty as the loser, which means the way you beat someone in open world PvP in this game is actually to lose to them on purpose in order to destroy their karma so that their karma gets too low and they are forced to leave, because no one's going to stand around after their negative karma and risk the death penalties. Even if you kill someone 10 times in a row, there's always that chance that, they might get lucky or you might desync or whatever, and they might get that kill on you, and then you have to suffer the penalties. So you're not going to stick around once your karma is low. Now, the very I don't play the game perspective on this from the devs is something along the lines of, well, we don't want new players to be grief. We don't want people just going around killing new players for no reason. Nobody does that. That's not how it works. Open world PvP works like this. You're in a grind spot, and someone else comes to the grind spot and starts messing up your rotation. They start killing your mobs and they try to force you out. And so you solve that problem with PvP. You flag up and you kill that person and you send them out. Now, if they continue to come back over and over again, that's all they have to do to beat you. They don't actually have to win in PvP. They just have to die to you a few times, and then your karma is too low to do anything about it. And then it no longer becomes a contest about who's the better player. It only becomes a contest about who is more willing to annoy the other person. And so you get these like basically grief offs where you and some stranger are grinding on top of each other, killing each other's moms until one of you finally has had enough and decides to lose the battle of wills and go away. So it's not like having this karma system in place reduces griefing or reduces PvP. A new player can still very easily have their spot taken by a veteran player. All the veteran player has to do is just walk up and kill their moms. You don't actually have to kill the person to grief them. In fact, I would say the most effective griefing strategies don't involve PvP at all. And it describes the kind of stuff that I'm talking about with messing with someone's rotation. And so, I mean, this isn't a difficult thing to fix. You can look at any other MMO that has world PvP and look for inspiration. There's a million different ideas that have been thrown out to fix this. You could do what some games do where you have like increasing res timers so that if you kill somebody and they come back and you kill them again, they are hit with like a 2-minute timer, and then they're hit with a 5-minute timer, and then they're hit with a 10-minute timer. It's just something to actually penalize losing in PvP. And if we don't want people to have the opportunity to lose in PvP, then just make grind spots instanced. Like, if you don't actually want the game to have scarcity, if you don't actually want people to compete over things, then why are you funneling everybody into these small parts of the game where they're going to fight? Like, the whole point of having open world grind spots with limited rotations is so that people will fight over them. If the developers don't want PvP, then just get rid of that incentive, get rid of that bottleneck. It's very easy to solve, and that's why it's so frustrating that it hasn't been solved. Next, on the topic of this is also a similar topic of PvP, the HP system for T1 Node Wars. So in T1 Node Wars, for no reason whatsoever, they decided that every 20 minutes, your maximum health is going to drop by 500. Now, your total health in T1s is already capped at 5,000. So after 20 minutes, it goes to 4.5k, and then 4, and then 3.5. And it eventually gets down to 2.5k at the end of the war. I just don't have any idea why this is in the game. It's basically ruined T1 nodes, which is one of the coolest parts of the game, both for veteran players and for new players who are trying to experience PvP in a scenario where gear is capped and they can actually compete. And I guess, like, if I'm trying to think, because I always try, I always try to do this. I always try to get in the mindset of the developers and think, okay, what are they actually trying to do here? And with T1s in the HP system, the best I can come up with is they think that there's a problem with stalemating, maybe, which there isn't, by the way. T1 wars were crazy fun. And even when they did stalemate, they stalemated with style. You'd have these like crazy 4v4 battles where it would, whittle down to 3v3 and 2v2 and 1v1, and then finally at the end, like the 1v1 would stalemate, and like, one of the forts would be at 3%, and you didn't know if someone, like, there was crazy fights happening at T1. It was by far the best PvP content in the game. But the devs, for whatever reason, got it in their head that stalemating was a problem, even though none of the players felt that way. And so they think that this mechanic maybe is going to solve that. In reality, lowering everyone's health in half does not fix stalemating. It actually makes stalemating worse, because the faster that everybody dies, the less options you have to actually project force onto your opponent's fort. If a random ninja or Hashishin can just pop out of the bushes and one-shot 5 people, then you can actually turtle super hard. All you have to do is just put a bunch of ninjas and Hashishins defending your fort, and when people come to push your fort, you pop out and one-shot them, and then you iframe away, and it actually makes it much easier to stalemate rather than harder. So the next thing I have here is the another PvP thing. This is the DR in Red Battlefield. For some reason, the devs have added a system in Red Battlefield, which is like the battlegrounds in Black Desert, where they like, it's hard to even describe how this works. They like stretch the left side of your health bar out. Basically, the lower your health becomes, the higher your damage reduction gets. So you have your regular damage reduction at 100% health, and then when you get down to half, you start to get tankier, and then when you get down to like 25%, you're even tankier, and they have some weird scale where like the lower your health is, the tankier you get. I don't know why this exists. If people are dying too fast in RBF, then either add gear capped RBFs, or reduce time, or like, increase time to kill, make people take less damage in the game overall, since this is an ongoing problem in other game modes as well. I don't know why the Battlefield's PvP in the game would have a different set of rules and a different calculation for how much damage you take than open world PvP or sieges or anything else. Why would you make it different? It doesn't really make any sense. Again, it's one of those things where I'm trying to think of what their goal is. And, if their goal is to make people survive longer, there's way better ways of doing it that make sense, that are intuitive. None of this stuff is ever really like explained in the game. So people kind of find out through word of mouth. And it's just very bizarre. What it feels like, and what a lot of the issues that they're adding to BDO feel like, is it's like duct tape on a leaky pipe, right? So your pipes are leaking in your house, and instead of just replacing the pipes or fixing the pipes, like going to the actual underlying problem, you just put duct tape on it. And then the next day, the pipe's leaking again. And so you just put more duct tape on it. And then a couple days go by, and what do you know? It's leaking again. Let's just put more duct tape on it. That's what this RBF change feels like. That's what the T1 change feels like. A lot of these changes and updates that are coming to the game recently, it's just duct tape on top of duct tape on top of duct tape. They never just stop and think, what are we actually trying to do here? And then go to the root cause and address that. So another very easily fixed thing, your character sheet. We're talking about how the mechanics in Red Battlefield aren't really explained. There's a bunch of stuff on your character sheet that's not explained either. Some of this is very intuitive or unintuitive. Some of this outright lies to you about what the stats are or what they do. There's a total right here for how much accuracy your character has. If I mouse over this question mark next to my AP, it says 369 accuracy. So let's see here. I have this alchemy stone that increases my accuracy by 10. When I activate that, my accuracy should go from 369 to 379, right? That's weird. It's still 369. Why doesn't this update? Same thing with crystals. I have 12 accuracy crystals in this pin Blackstar Longswords. The item itself has 212 accuracy. When I take this off and then I mouse over, I go from 369 to 157. That's a difference of 212. It should be a difference of 236, but there's an extra 24 accuracy in the weapon that's just not getting counted because it's in the form of a crystal. So the game arbitrarily totals up the accuracy that is directly on the top part of the item's tooltip, but it doesn't tell you how much accuracy your class has as a baseline. It doesn't tell you how much you're getting from guild buffs. It doesn't tell you how much you're getting from food or other consumables. It doesn't tell you how much you get from crystals or alk stones. And so this number is essentially meaningless. I mean, it leaves out like half of the information that you would need to know about how much accuracy you actually have. And this is just so unnecessarily confusing to both new and veteran players. And how long would this take to fix? I mean, really, how long would it take to make it so that your accuracy total here includes your crystals and your food? It can't be that hard. And yet, this is, problems like this persist in the game for years. So we also have another easily fixable thing, arbitrary market caps. My favorite is this one. They've actually fixed a lot of these. It used to be that pretty much every high-end item in the game had an artificial cap on it that didn't make any sense. Now there's only a few of them left, but it's still, it's so easily fixed. I don't understand why it's like this. So Pen Blackstar Greatsword is a sword that at bare minimum, if you just count the material that goes into it, average value is probably something like 120 billion. And surprise, surprise, for a price of 99.5 billion, there's not a lot of people who want to sell it. Why is it capped at 99.5 billion? No idea. There's other items in the game that will go higher than that. But this one is just capped for no reason. Very easily fixed. I mean, if you actually let the market decide what this item was worth, it'd probably be something like 160 billion, because you have to factor in not only the materials, but you have to factor in RNG, you have to factor in the time that it takes to build the fail stack to do this. I mean, just 99.5 billion is an absurd price, and it's very obvious. It's been obvious since the first day the item was added to the game. And, you know, how long would it take to fix? How long would it take to go in and just raise this cap from 100 bill to 150 bill or even 200 bill? You know, I don't get it. So the next thing, moving on to tedious chores as content. We already talked about the T10 daily. That's my favorite one. But pretty much every event that they have in BDO now is like some sort of either copy and paste from a previous event that we've already done in 2020 and 2019 and 2018, or it's just not interesting. It's like go to X random location and do Y random activity in the middle of nowhere in order to get like C mediocre result. There's no like interesting mechanics or challenges behind any of these events. They don't pull you in. They don't immerse you. They're all instantly forgotten the second that they end. And it's strange because you look at BDO Mobile, and the events on BDO Mobile were actually pretty good. They were pretty like fun little side activities to do, and the rewards were meaningful. And you felt like, oh man, I need to make sure I log into BDO today to do that because I don't want to miss out. The events in BDO PC they're just chores. They really 80% of them are just pointless chores that it feels like somebody added to the game at 4:59 on a Friday before clocking out and going home for the weekend. There's just no thought put into them at all. There's like weird processing times for some of these. Like you'll have to go out and gather random materials and then process them together. And instead of giving the item like a 10-second processing timer, they'll give it like a 60-second processing timer, and then they'll add a chance for it to fail as well. So you're literally just sitting there like AFK processing in town for 60 seconds, and then it fails, and then you have to do it again, and then you have to repeat that like 80 times to complete the event. And it's like, wow, why? Adventure journals. These are another thing that are so good on BDO Mobile, and I don't understand what the problem is with PC. The adventure journals on BDO Mobile dovetail with the regular game. They are sort of like add-on bonuses, collections, sort of like completionist things that you can do that tie in to interesting and fun activities that you're already doing in BDO Mobile. The adventure journals on BDO PC are like spend an hour going around buying chandelier from NPCs. And, how do you find the chandelier? You tab out and you go to BDO Codex and you look up where they are. Um, Very bizarre, tedious. Almost all the adventure journals are like this. There was a couple that were actually really good. There were a couple adventure journals that had like riddles, or like lore questions, like stuff that you actually had to think about, or like they would have one that was like a screenshot in the game, and you had to try to figure out where that screenshot was. And so like that kind of stuff was cool. You're like going around, you're opening your map, you're talking to your friends, like, hey, like what does this look like? We got to find this place. So a few of these have been actually really good, but 80-90% of them, it's just absolute filler. Like it's absolute just chore content. And I don't know why they insist on adding so much of this to the game. All right, next topic. Fun prevention for no reason. There used to be the most amazing thing that you could do with T8 and above horses. I think it was T8, maybe it was T9s. Whatever horses get double jump, you could jump up the side of a mountain and you could use mouse movement to turn your horse, and you could finesse your way up any mountain in the game. And you could only do it with really high tier horses. And it wasn't like you could mess up and you could accidentally mouse move and like jump off the side of the cliff and kill yourself. So there was a little bit of finesse to it. But it was so good. It was so useful for like navigating and getting around. Without that, half the time I'm trying to jump over something. So I have a horse that literally flies. Let me just show you guys. Half the time when I am traveling around with this literal flying horse, I get stuck on fences that are 6 inches tall. Like, I can't. That one worked. But there's like little structures in the game that you'll just get stuck on, like this. And you could use mouse movements to avoid that. You could jump around a lot of stuff, and it felt like your horse was actually like a legendary horse who could get you places. They saw some streamers using this to have fun in the game, and they just deleted it for no reason. And now it's really hard to navigate difficult terrain with your horse, and you just get stuck on a bunch of stuff, and it takes a long time, and it's not interesting or fun, and just makes the game less good for no reason. We had a super fun clip that I did once out in the desert. My first TED accessory ever, way back in the day. I had just hit level 62, and I got my Kaposha earring, which was a level 62 item at the time. And so that freed up a slot for me to go for Tet earring. And so on the way back from Fogan's, where I was grinding at the time, I'm running across the desert, and there's a sandstorm in the middle of the desert. And I'm thinking, oh man, what a good place to try to upgrade my earring. And so I run out into the middle of the sandstorm, and I open my Black Spirit, and I go and I throw the item in to enhance. And whenever you take damage, this screen gets closed, and the sandstorm damages you like every 5 seconds or something. So I had to open the menu and like throw the item in real quick and try to enhance it, and it kept getting interrupted. I would do it too slow, and I would like try to enhance it, and then the sandstorm would hit me and it would knock me out. And so it was this like frantic, goofy clip, and eventually I was able to get the enhance off, and I took the damage, and it closed the window, and the enhancement went off in the backgrounds. And you guys can go look up the clip if you want. It's pretty funny to watch. But it was just like some fun, goofy thing that we were doing out in the desert. And, it looked kind of odd, and it was like kind of frantic. And I successfully enhanced my first Tet earring in the middle of a sandstorm, and it was this like epic moment. And so the next week, the developers added a patch note saying you can no longer enhance in sandstorms. So they saw this clip of me. They got like a ton of views of us having fun, and their instinctive response to that was, let's patch it out. Why? Why did they feel the need to take time out of their day to patch out sandstorm enhancing when there's so many other things that they could be working on? I have no idea. I will never know. Let's just make the game less fun for no reason. Okay, so here's another fun prevented thing. And this is more than just fun prevention. This is sort of like creativity prevention. They added this system into the game called NPC dating. And the NPC dating system itself is kind of in the DOA content category. But there was a few things you could do with it that were interesting. One of the things that you could do, there's this NPC in Heidel that you could give Ronaros rings to, and she would like you. Or Ornella would fall in love with you if you gave her Ronaros rings. Those were her favorite. And so Ronaros rings at the time were very flooded on the market. They were min price. You barely couldn't sell any of them. There was like tens of thousands of them that would just sit at the absolute minimum price, and it would take months and months for you to make a transaction if you were selling. So the other thing about Ornella is that she sells offhands. She sells green offhands for various different classes. And around the time that NPC dating was added to the game, the shy class was also introduced. So I know this is a little confusing, but follow me here because this is like. So the shy class comes out, and all these people are hyped to play this new class. And one of the things that happens when a new class comes out is there's a complete run on all of that class's weapons. Like none of the class's weapons existed before the class. And so anytime a weapon of any kind, even if it's a low quality weapon, if it gets posted on the market, people will buy it out right away. So there's a huge demand for weapons for these new classes. And Ornella sells the offhands for these classes, but they are limited by amity. Now, amity is basically one of the currencies that you're generating through the NPC dating system when you give someone a gift. So, some clever player figured out that you could go to the market, buy this item that was flooded, give it to Ornella to increase her amity, spend that amity to buy weapons for new shy players, enhance those weapons up to higher levels using, your highly practiced fail stacking technique, and sell those things for a profit. And it was pretty good money. It wasn't going to last forever. It crashed after, like it was about to crash, I should say. It didn't have the chance to crash because fun was prevented. The devs caught on that some of us were doing this, and they were like, well, that's just, you're just connecting things that we don't want connected. How dare you use this NPC system to increase amity when amity is the thing that you can use to buy this item that you then found a market for, and like, we don't want you making money that way. The only allowed way that you can make money in this game is by running in a circle killing mobs. If you come up with anything creative, that's not allowed. So they patched that out as well. There's so many other examples of things like this that I could give. Like, I know it sounds like I'm ranting and that I'm going on and on, but like I'm abbreviating so much. I'm cutting out like 90% of the things that I could say in each of these categories. What other fun prevention do I have here? Okay, so tagging. There's a character tag system where, hold on, I have to put my shield skin on, it's bothering me. There's a character system, tagging system, where you can link your character to one of your other characters. I have my Sage linked, and it copies your weapons from your main character over to your tag character, which is a pretty cool system. It allows you to play more than one character without having to develop more than one set of gear. And like in concept, I like that. So what's the problem here? There's a few things. First of all, the tagging system is this like old antiquated system that they added a long time ago that has a bunch of restrictions to it that don't make sense anymore. One of those restrictions is that you cannot turn in imperial crafting boxes. So if you're somebody who does like imperial cooking or imperial alchemy, and that's one of the ways you make money, you just can't use the tagging system. Why? No reason. It's just like you're just not allowed to. Now, there's another issue that they actually just recently fixed, where you couldn't switch to if you switched to your tag character, there was a 5-minute cooldown. So this would also happen like if you change channels or if you change to one of your other characters, you would initiate this 5-minute cooldown between your main character and your tagged character. Now you could very easily bypass this cooldown by just going to character select and choosing the character from there. So it wasn't actually a cooldown, but they just left it in the game for a really, really long time. And I would complain about this all the time. Like, this is so easy. Why don't they just remove this cooldown? Everyone thinks it's annoying. It doesn't serve any purpose. And so this week, actually, someone messages me on Discord, and they're like, hey, in the patch notes, they removed the cooldown from tag. Like, they listened to you. And this is another tangent, but like the idea that they listened to the players about this, to me, like they don't get any credit for listening when it comes to an issue like this. This is such an obvious, basic functionality thing that anyone who actually ever used the tagging system would know right away if they played the game. It's like, let me try to make an analogy. If you logged into the game and like your W key just didn't work anymore, like there was a bug in BDO where you just no longer could use the W key. If you had anything bound to the W key, it didn't work. If you wanted to move forward, you had to figure out a different button to press. And then that was an issue in the game for a year and a half. and then we complained about it, and then they finally fixed it. Is that them listening to the player? Like, anyone who just logged into the game and pressed W would know it was broken. It shouldn't get to the point where they even have to listen to the players, and they don't. We shouldn't celebrate when something that basic gets fixed. Like, that is the baseline. Just fix very easy, obvious, broken things, right? Like, we should celebrate them listening to us on, more complex issues having to do with, progression or PvP or whatever. Like, having these like super, super simple baseline stuff where like literally just make the game work for head. Like it shouldn't even have to get to the point where they listen to us. If they played the game, if they understood the game, then these issues wouldn't persist for such crazy periods of time. All right. Next category. Premature announcements lead to unkept promises or rushed dead on arrival content. There's way too many of these to list, but here are some examples of things that they've officially announced, as in like these are things that are coming to the game, and they never happened. We have the climbing life skill, the pottery life skill, Calphion versus Valencia territory war, Node War rework. That's been announced many times over many different eras of the game, where they said we're gonna fix Node Wars, we're gonna rework Node Wars, and pretty much every time, I think there was one actual rework that we got way back in the day, but pretty much every other time they bring this up, it just disappears and nothing ever happens. Hybrid life skills, such as the example they gave was you're going to be able to combine your farming and your fishing together and make fish farms. A bit of a weird idea, but nonetheless, it is something that they announced, and so, it was something life skillers were kind of looking forward to. No idea what happened to that. Stars End World Boss, Loot Scroll Point System, Thornwood Castle. Man, Thornwood Castle. I was so excited for Thornwood Castle when they announced it. They had this, like, PvP VE high-end mode in the new expansion Odalito, where you would have a team of 5 and your opponents would have a team of 5, or maybe it was a team of 10, I don't remember, but you'd have this PvE phase where you'd be fighting the mobs, and then you'd have a PvP phase where you and the other players would compete over the final goal. And we never really figured out exactly what the details were, but the concept sounded really cool, and the game desperately needs new meaningful PvP modes. And so when this was announced, we were like, oh man, like I can't wait. It now appears that Thornwood Castle has been canceled after more than a year of development. They also announced that they were going to rework Zodiac signs to give bonuses at certain times, which is like a meme in the game that the devs kind of ran with, but I don't know what happened to that. Blue Battlefields, they announced that there would be kind of like the Red Battlefield PvP mode. Blue Battlefield would be a PvP arena, or a PvP battleground, but for boats, for people who build boats and do cannons and all that. It's announced a very, very long time ago. No idea what happens to that. There's an issue in the game where we'll go over this a little bit more in the PvP section, but there's an issue in the game where the higher your FPS is on certain classes, the more damage you do. You heard that right. That is how it works. And they promised to fix this. They tried fixing it once, but they broke other parts of the game, and so they reverted the patch, and then they just never brought it up again, and haven't acknowledged since then that it's an issue or indicated that they have any intention of actually fixing it like they said they would, even though it's a major, major long-standing issue in the game. Here's a big one: season improvements. So they canceled the spring season this year. And the reason they canceled the spring season is because they wanted to take the time to develop a more fun season for the summer. And I was 100% behind this because seasons had gotten completely stale. Um, Seasons in BDO, I could make a whole video just about the problems with seasons in and of itself. That could have been its own category here. They're not really seasons. You bring in a lot of your gear and a lot of your resources from outside the season, so it's not actually a fresh start. And if you're a new player coming into the game on a season and you're competing against a veteran player who's starting the same season with all their cronstones and all their quest gear, um, like you're literally like 2 months behind on day one. Like the veteran player will just crush you. So, they could make seasons an actual fresh start and give them interesting mechanics similar to what Path of Exile does or other seasonal games. And that could be phenomenal. Like we could have an actual reason to start fresh and do this like, gear race, or, try to get to, whatever the season objective is that they come up with. That could actually be really fun and really interesting. But instead, we just get these kind of very boring copy and paste like objectives that people mainly just finish in a few days and then they don't want to play the season anymore. And so seasons were clearly stale. They were in a bad spot after season 3. And so they said, okay, we're canceling season 4 and we're going to work on it and improve it for season 5. Well, season 5 just started and there's only one improvement. And they made it so that you could skip the main story quest, which granted is a really big improvement. That's something I was asking for a long time because nothing kills your hype for a new class or a new season more than having to go through the 10-hour slog of just running simulator, talking simulator that is the main quest in this game. Like a new class will come out and you'll be super hyped to play it and you'll want to go kill stuff. But instead of killing stuff, you're kind of like forced to do this 10-hour story in order to get your season objectives, and then you can go kill stuff, but you're so tired and like bored by the end of the main quest that it sucks all the hype out of a new season. And so they fixed that, or they at least improved that by getting rid of the main story or giving you the option to skip the main story. So that's great. But there's still like 90 other problems with seasons that they just aren't addressing at all. And it's very strange that they took this entire quarter off of seasons and told us they were going to work on it and improve it, and all they did was change one thing. What happened to all the other changes? Like it feels like when they announce things in this game, they announce them in like the raw concept phase. They don't announce things when they're ready. They announce things like someone will have an idea and they'll come into the office and they'll say, "Hey, we should do XYZ," and then someone else at the company goes, "That sounds great. Put it in the press release." And it's like, it feels like they haven't even started to work on most of the things that they've announced on. Like it's literally still in the idea phase and they're already announcing it as if this is something that is for sure coming to the game. And it just completely sets up these false expectations over and over and over again. And, this is a constant problem that's been happening since 2017. Every time they do a big announcement, there's massive numbers of things that they announce that just never happen. Or they do get put in the game, but they're rushed and they're just completely dead. Some examples of that would be like airships. They made this big thing about, how they're going to add airships to the game. When they finally did add them after many, many delays, they're basically just like a World of Warcraft style flight point where you can't move or control your character at all. You just sit there in a blimp and go from the first town to the second town. And it's like, I guess it's supposed to be scenic or something, but it's basically pointless. They had this team battle PvP mode that they added that was dead within hours of release, where you would have a team that would queue up against another team, and then like one of your people would fight them, and then at the end of the fight you would have like your remaining health left over, and someone would come and fight the person who only had like half their health left, and they would kill them, and then the other person would come and fight the next person who only had like a third of their health left. It was just a really weird, bizarrely designed system. Instead of just doing a regular 1v1 arena like what every other game has, and again, like what BDO Mobile has, BDO Mobile on day one of release had 1v1 and 3v3 arenas that were ranked with leaderboards with monthly resets. And BDO PC adds these, this like bizarre battle arena thing that's kind of an arena but kind of not. really just not good design, and it's unclear why it was even added to the game to begin with. Like anyone who played it would know it wasn't fun right away. It's dead within a couple hours of releasing of hitting the live servers, and that's it. They just kind of like don't touch arenas for years after that. They've now announced that they are going to be adding arenas to the game, and um, man, I thought I would be excited when I heard that, but I'm just not. Like, I've been asking for ranked arenas in this game for so many years. And when they finally announced it, instead of feeling, wow, like they're actually doing it, instead what I felt was, maybe. Yeah, maybe they'll add it. It's like a 30% chance they'll add that. But even if they do add it, there's then like an 80% chance that there's going to be some fundamental design flaw with it and it's not going to be fun. So, like, how do you get hyped for a game for new content when the new content A either has a very large, higher than 50% chance of not ever being released, and B has a very large after that chance of, even if it does get released, it's probably going to be rushed. It's probably going to have some major flaw or some major bug that takes months or years to fix, or they'll just complete it and they'll just forget it entirely and set it aside, like they have with so many other systems that we'll talk about in the neglected systems part of the video. And so, yeah, I mean, it's hard to look forward to things in this game when that's been the pattern. All right, next section here: greedy monetization, creating problems just to sell solutions. This is, again, something I could probably make an entire video on. The biggest thing everyone knows is cronstones and artisans' memories. As soon as they added artisan memory to the cash shop and cronstone extraction to the cash shop, progress in the game was never the same. And it gets about twice as bad every year. So the amount of pay to win that goes into the game, the amount of pay to progress that goes into the game. This is a problem that started in 2017 after they told us that the game wouldn't have these functions. They left things like Artisan's Memory and Cronstones out of the launch version of the game in order to, sucker us all in thinking that this wasn't going to be a pay to win game. And then they pulled the bait and switch. They added these things in the second year of development. And then every year after that, they have basically doubled the impact of those items through various design choices, through lowering the price of the cash shop so that more people feel inclined to buy these things and pay for their progress rather than earning their progress in the game. And every year it just feels less and less like what I do in the game actually matters. And it feels more and more like how much money I spend on the game is really the thing I should be doing in order to, push myself forward and stay competitive. But there's all kinds of problems in this game that they create just so that they can sell the solution. One of them is horse skill training. So my horsey here has a bunch of different skills that start at like 20%, and they will fail until they get to 100%. And so, here, let's see, I think I have this one locked, but I have this skill where if I use it, I actually don't even know how to use the skill because I have it locked. There we go. See, it fails, and then it kicks me off my horse. And there's a little mini game that you can do that will prevent you from getting kicked off the horse, but a lot of times it just sort of instantly fails and you don't have time to do it. Yeah, so like I mashed W there, but I was too slow. I'm not good enough at the game. But even if you do the mini game, it's this like really tedious, boring thing that you have to do over and over and over again, dozens or hundreds of times before your skill finally hits 100. And like if you have a new horse and you're trying to use one of the main skills like sprint or instant excel, you're just constantly falling off your horse. Or even if you're not falling off, you're constantly doing this goofy little mini game and your horse is, sitting there stuttering and you can't actually get anywhere you want to go. It's not an interesting mini game. It's not fun. It's not an engaging mechanic. It's just there to annoy you, and the only way to get around it is to spend money in the cash shop. There's a bunch of other things that are like that. Fairy skills. I don't even really want to get into it, but this is just such a badly designed, greedy system. This skill right here, Miraculous Cheer 5, is mandatory for PvP. If you do not have this, your health regeneration is at a massive disadvantage compared to everyone else. You have to manually smash the heal pot key every 2 seconds. And when you account for latency and just, input lag and like the fact that you're distracted doing your actual combo, it's a massive disadvantage to have anything other than Miraculous Cheer 5. And the way you get this is an RNG system that's basically tied to you spending real life money to reroll your skills until you get the one you want. And it's not fun. It's not interesting. There's so many other ways that they could have implemented this where you could use in-game resources to reroll the skills rather than cash shop. But the very limited mechanisms you do have to reroll your fairy skills with actual in-game stuff, extremely limited, not fun to do, and tedious to the point where of course the devs aren't going to fix it because they make money off of people buying the cash shop alternative. There's lots of stuff that's like that. The relic scrolls that you run to get memory fragments. There's either a database entry, I don't want to pull it up, but there's either a database entry or a data mine that indicated that they had. So first, let me explain what relic scrolls are. I'm getting ahead of myself. Relic scrolls are, and I know a lot of the things I'm saying sound sarcastic or sound hyperbolic. I'm not exaggerating when I say this. I'm not trying to be dramatic when I say this. Running relic scrolls in Black Desert is the most boring thing I have ever done in an MMO. And I have played a lot of MMOs over a lot of years, and nothing I have ever had to do in an MMO is more boring than running memory frag relic scrolls. You basically just sit there watching a boss animation, and then you kill the boss in 5 seconds, and then you watch another super long boss animation as he spawns. You kill him in 5 seconds, and then you just do that over and over and over again. And if you actually want to get enough memory fragments to have any impact on your gear, you've got to do this for hours and I'm talking days and days and days of this if you want to actually get anywhere with it. So most people just buy their memory fragments off the markets from newer players who still have the willpower to run these things. And there's an easy solution to this. And the devs have already thought of this solution, and someone actually already created the solution at Pearl Abyss. There is an awakened relic scroll, which means basically you would combine a bunch of your relic scrolls together. You combine 5 or 10 together, and then you would run them all at once. And then the awakened relic scroll, they could put other improvements in it as well. They could make the bosses actually interesting. That could be one thing they could do. They could get rid of the summon animation so that you're actually doing combat instead of just sitting there, literally just sitting there staring at your screen doing nothing for a predetermined amount of time. They could fix that, right? They could get rid of that timer, and they could make it an actual fun, interesting part of the game. And the solution has already been implemented in the back end, in the test server somewhere. It's in the database. It's been data mined, but they refuse to put Awakened Relic Scrolls in the game. Why? It's one of two things for sure. It's either gross incompetence, right? It's back to the first category of just straight up easy fixes that they won't do, even though they're very easy and very obvious, or it's greed. Maybe they think that by adding Awakened Relic Scrolls and by making the process less tedious, people will be less likely to buy Artisan's Memories from the cash shop, because Artisan Memories reduce the burden of having to use so many memory fragments on your gear. And so it's either incompetence or it's a monetary incentive that they have set up for themselves to keep the game bad in order to force people to spend money to skip the bad parts. I could go on and on here, but let's move on. Neglecting or outright ruining good systems. So this is probably the biggest of all the issues. I don't know. They're all big issues, but man, when I first started playing BDO, and I went from Olvia to Velia, and I discovered a few nodes, and I went to Velia, and I opened my map for the first time, and I saw this coastal cave with these iron nodes and copper nodes. Dude, I just buried myself in this system for a month. I thought it was so cool. I would hire workers and keep track of which materials I was getting from which area. I had this whole system of efficient node connections. It was this crazy, well-designed system where you would send your workers to get the resources, and then you had to balance that between putting workers in like actual workshops in the towns where you could make stuff, and all these items were like very useful. The reform stones, the various different weapons that you could use. You had to min max your contribution points and like figure out how much you wanted to spend on lodging, how much you wanted to spend on workshops. There was all this really interesting stuff that you could do. It was actually a very well designed system. Made a ton of guides on this. I mean, this is practically what launched my Twitch channel, was this system and the guides that I made around it. People loved this shit. Like it was so good. It was so fun, and none of it matters anymore. None of it matters at all. Like people come every once in a while and they ask me like, "Are you gonna make an updated node guide?" And I'm like, "What's the point?" Like, they don't really matter anymore. You can just buy the stuff off the market. Like there's not all the workshops. Have been made redundant. You don't need things like reform stones at all. Don't need to craft green weapons anymore. There's a few players who might still be making kernel or wagons or something like that, but it's not nearly as impactful of a part of the game as it used to be. And that's something that could be avoided. They could put people on this to keep the systems interesting, expansion after expansion. They just don't. Valencia was the last expansion that had any thought whatsoever put into the nodes. The nodes in Odalita, Drigan, and Kama Sylvia are all just zero effort, bare minimum nonsense. Nobody who made the nodes for these regions has ever used nodes or used workers in the game to any extent. They don't know what they're doing. It's crazy. It's irrelevant. It's pointless. You could delete every node from these 3 regions and it would have almost no impact on the game. And the workshops, like there's actually, you can visually see the laziness when it comes to workshops. Look at the buildings in Calpheon. Look at all the different branches that you can do here. Like this building will branch into this building, and this building will branch into this building, and you can stack like lodging on top of a workshop and then another workshop on top of that one, and there's all these different puzzles you can solve about like where you want to put your contribution and which workshop's going to yield the most silver for the most materials. Like this is a whole game in and of itself. Look at Calpheon City compared to Duvenkroon, which has 1 or 2 chains, compared to Odraxia. Literally 1 chain of buildings. They didn't even try. I mean, they didn't even try. What else can you say? There is no effort here to make workshops a thing in Odraxia. There's no effort to make worker lodging or crafting or anything like that something that even exists in the Odalita expansion. It's just neglected. They just gave up. They didn't even try, and it's a bummer because it's one of my favorite parts of the game for a really long time, man. And it's not that hard to keep it going. There's lots of ways lots of things you can implement that would make it interesting again. Now, neglected systems affects a lot of different things in the game. I think probably the biggest one is fishing. The fishing community in the first couple years of BDO was one of the most like amazing, wholesome, active communities I've ever seen in an MMO. There were people who were out there like mapping out which fish spawned in which region and like how much XP you could get and how much silver you can get, what the best routes were. People were out fishing for titles, and like there was a whole subgenre, a whole subgame based around fishing. It was pretty good income for a while. There was a variety of ways that you could make it better income. There was hotspot fishing where you and the homies would, drive around the ocean looking for hotspots, and it would actually end up being pretty good money. It was something you could do with your friends. Very immersive, very just cool, interesting system that was clearly made, with a lot of good intention and good ideas, and it's just not been updated in like 2 or 3 years. Like it's just in an absolute state of disrepair. Every once in a while they try to wrap some duct tape around it, but in reality the pipe burst years ago and we're all just kind of forgotten that it exists. It's so easy to improve fishing. I mean, just add more hotspots, right? Like make the hotspots have a jackpot that people can get excited over. Add a 500 million silver fish at a low rate that you can get from hotspots, so that you and your friends can go fishing, and you see someone reel up this 500 mil fish and they do the cheer animation and maybe they hold the fish above their head for a second and everybody sees it and you go, oh, you hit it, bro, you got the 500 mil fish. Add trophies that people can hang up in their houses. Like, there's so much stuff you could do either to make the skill useful in terms of income or to make it just cool in terms of like role playing and immersion, and they just don't. Sniper hunting, another system that's been completely neglected. They spent all this work, like they spent months of development on sniper hunting, and they did like 95% of the work that they need to do to make it good, and they just refuse to finish it. Like, it's just in this almost finished state. It's actually pretty cool. Like, if you go to the sniper hunting zone and you pull out a rifle and you try to hunt some elk, the concept is really good. You have this like a rifle that's kind of hard to aim, and as your skill goes up, your aim gets better and it's easier to zero in on what you're hitting, and you actually feel like you're sniping a mob. But the controls are a little clunky and the mob behavior is a little weird and the rewards are kind of bad. But none of those things are impossible to fix. You could clean up the controls a little bit. You could clean up the mob behavior just a little bit. Like, it's close. It really is close. And then you could just increase the rewards. And sniper hunting would be a staple. It would be a staple life skill thing that tons of people would do. But they just don't finish it. Lakiaro. I've already ranted about Lakiaro, so I don't need to go into it again here. But absolutely neglected. Easy to fix. My suggestion for fixing it was just to tie stage 4 and stage 5 Lakiaros to your gathering mastery. So this would keep it from getting imbalanced or from being too easy to get into. You would have to invest into your gathering gear and get your gathering mastery up. And then the higher your gathering mastery is, the higher your chance of getting stage 4s and stage 5s would be, which would not only make Lakiaro more fun because we like doing stage 4s and stage 5s, but it would also increase the income and make it relevant again. The other thing they could do is they could easily make the rewards for 14 by 14 Lakiaro 5 to 10 times higher. Like, literally, they're so undertuned. You have a 12 by 12 Lakiaro puzzle, which is, if once you've practiced it a while, not super difficult to solve, but 14 by 14 is like 10 times more difficult and gives the exact same reward. What kind of game design is that? What's the point? Just make it better. Like, just go increase the number. You're not going to hurt the game. No one's going to be mad that you made something difficult rewarding. Night Vendor is another thing that used to be so exciting. We would have Night Vendor streams where I would save up my energy on every character for 2 weeks straight. And we would spend, we couldn't spend the entire stream because night only lasts like 40 minutes, but like we would save up all our energy and we would schedule it like, hey, be here at this time. We're going to spend all our energy on Night Vendor, and we'd just, roll the dice over and over again. Blackstones, Beg's gloves, holy shit, and it would be the super exciting thing. It hasn't been updated in super long. You can't really get anything cool from Night Vendor anymore. Very easy to fix. Make it so you can get Vel's Heart at a really low drop rate. Make it so you can get Garmoths at a really low drop rate. Like, add some actual lotteries in there. Make it so that you can get enhanced accessories. It doesn't have to be pens, but you could throw like a try or a 10 in there for half of market value. Make it super rare. You don't have to break the economy, but like, this stuff isn't hard to fix. And instead, the solution that they have to Night Vendor is like, they added like a Caphras bundle like once, and it's just, it's duct tape on top of duct tape. They don't actually just go in and just make the thing good. Outdated market caps is another neglected system, and this actually has massive impact on the game. If you look at right now, this is the big one, hard black crystal shards. Why are these capped at 1.6 mil? It doesn't make any sense. This cap has been in the game for way too long. All it does is nerf gathering for no reason. This is a core component that people need to progress their combat gear. And so all you're doing by limiting this is essentially lowering the price for combat characters and lowering the profit for gatherers. So you're essentially arbitrarily transferring wealth from the gathering player base to the combat player base. Is that something that needs to happen? Combat is by far more lucrative for most players than gathering is in its current state right now, which is one of the reasons why these things are maxed out with 12,000 pre-orders, because nobody wants to do this. Nobody wants to go and gather. It's not worth it when you could just grind for way more money. And when these things are capped at such arbitrarily low prices. just raise them. Just stop neglecting the market. There's other stuff that we could look at, milk, rough stone, wolf meat, all these things come to mind. Look at the orders on some of these. There's 740,000 pre-orders on wolf meat. You can't raise the price on that a little bit? Really? Like, we're that scared that people gathering wolf meat are going to get too wealthy that we need to cap it at 9,500? I just don't get it, man. It's so outdated. Altar of Blood, Savage Rift, two things that could be fun, two things that were fun once upon a time when they came out. They were interesting, they were new. They just never got updated. And so now they sit empty. And then, in addition to neglected systems that don't get updated, systems that, all the things that I'm mentioning here are like things that were either very close to being good or at one point in the game were incredibly good systems that you like logged into the game for, that you love doing. But in addition to those things being neglected, there's some systems that they've just outright ruined, and like gone out of their way. Not we haven't updated this, but instead we have updated this. We've just updated it to make it way, way worse. So the things that come to mind are most of the things I've already mentioned. We have T1 Node Wars, Red Battlefield. They're so much worse than they used to be with these new mechanics. Horse breeding, so much less interesting than it used to be. So many cool things they could have done with the T9, the T10 system, and instead of these weird, boring chore simulators that they did. They could have just continued the 1 through T8 system and added more interesting horses, add different stats you could breed, add rare horses you could catch out in the wild. There's so many cool things they could have done, man. But instead, they just ruined it with this T9 and T9 shit. This is another thing that could be its own video. Anyone remember Shadow Arena? Anyone remember Shadow Arena? When they announced Shadow Arena, this was like during the peak of the BR Battle Royale hype, when every single dev, every single game company was announcing a Battle Royale. And it was so cringe when Pearl Abyss announced the Battle Royale. We were all like just rolling our eyes. Okay, way to hop on the bandwagon. Like we were all memeing on it. There was no way that anyone thought this was actually going to be good. They nailed it. It was so fun. I did it all day, every day. It was all I wanted to do in BDO was queue up for Shadow Arena. The rewards were good. The pacing was good. The content was good. The balancing was okay. Like, it was so fun, man. It was unironically the best Battle Royale experience I've ever had. There were interesting new mechanics that they were doing that other Battle Royales hadn't thought of. The way that you progressed through the Battle Royale, the way that you got gear, the way that you balanced your farming versus your PvP. It was actually such a good game mode. It had some kind of wild imbalances and bugs at the beginning. They fixed those pretty quick. They were actually pretty good at listening to feedback. So fun. So what happened? They added a free trial system where anyone could hop into the game for free without buying an account and go do Shadow Arena. So what did this lead to? Massive numbers of hackers who would just download free accounts, speed hack across Shadow Arena, ruin the game, get banned, and then just start another free trial account. And so the obvious solution to that, I think, would be if you have a massive number of free trial accounts that are hacking, end the free trial. Or make it so that trial accounts can't enter Shadow Arena. That seems like one way of fixing it. But instead, they just disabled Shadow Arena completely and took it out of the game. It was so fun, you guys. I have so many good memories from Shadow Arena. I have so many good clips and highlights from Shadow Arena. Like, I was going back and watching some of my BDO clips in preparation for this video and trying to organize all my thoughts, and it was such a good time. And it is gone now, and they have said over and over again that they're never bringing it back. And the reason they're never bringing it back is because they made a standalone game, which has utterly failed for very predictable reasons. the main one being desync, which we'll talk about in the PvP section. But basically, they added this system to the standalone Shadow Arena, where your basic attacks CC or interrupt, and like they added a bunch of mechanics that make the game kind of laggier, and then predictably your fights feel clunky and laggy as a result, and the combat's just not as good as it was in BDO and doesn't feel fun to play, and nobody liked it, and it's been a colossal failure. You can go look at the Steam charts. It's doing really, really badly. Like for a studio with this much money, it's an abject failure. And they still refuse to put it back in the game. They still continue, I guess, pouring money into the standalone version that doesn't appear to be going anywhere. It makes me really sad. It really does. All right. We still have a lot to get through. Lack of quality control and hidden stats. So these are two completely separate issues that each deserve their own section, but I'm going to talk about them kind of at the same time because one of them impacts the other in a significant way. So BDO has all kinds of stats that are not shown, and it's less so now. They've revealed a bunch of them, and the reason that they've revealed a bunch of the stats that used to be hidden is because there was a data mine a few years back, and the data mine revealed some things that were very, very puzzling to the majority of the player base. It revealed all of these numbers in brackets that you see. So at the very top here where it says Griffin Helmet, DP 86, Evasion 31, and then parentheses 63. The 63 used to be hidden. Same thing below, damage reduction 55, and then parentheses 25. That used to be hidden. And in fact, at one point, the game didn't even give you the breakdown of evasion and damage reduction. It just only told you how much DP an item had. And so you could have one item with 80 DP and another item with 80 DP, and they would be completely different from each other. One of them would have a lot of damage reduction, one of them would have a lot of evasion, and you would have no way of knowing that. And then in addition to not knowing the substats of the item, there were then hidden sub-substats put in parentheses on top of that. So there's basically no way to ever figure out how good any item in the game was based on the stats that they gave you. The stats they gave you are sort of just like non sequitur placeholder nonsense. Some of these, like the ratios on these items don't even make sense. You'll have some items where the damage reduction, it'll say 5 DP, and it'll just say 5 damage reduction, and there's nothing in the brackets. And then you'll have other items, this happens more with evasion actually than it does with damage reduction, but you'll have one item where like the evasion will just be the evasion, and then there will be, if it's got 5 evasion, it'll have 5 hidden evasion. There's another item that's got 5 evasion with 10 hidden evasion, and another item with 5 hidden evasion and 15 hidden evasion. So under the old system, all 3 of those, the 5 hidden, the 10 hidden, the 15 hidden, or even the 0 hidden, all 4 of those things would just say 5 DP. Literally completely different stats. The 5 plus 15 is 4 times better than the item that's just 5. But all of them would just say 5. It's like, it's really hard to wrap your head around if you haven't played the game. But even if you have played the game, it's impossible to wrap your head around. I've said several times throughout this video that I try to put myself in the mindset of the devs and I try to figure out what they're going for. I cannot fathom. There is no logic that I can come up with that explains that sort of game design. It's just arbitrary weirdness, the best way I can summarize it. So anyways, we have this data mine that shows all these hidden stats. The player base freaks out, rightly so, because none of it makes any sense. And so eventually they start adding the hidden stats onto items, but they're still kind of obscured in a way that doesn't really make any sense to new players. You have to like really dive in. You basically have to watch a guide on how this stuff works in order to actually get it. We went over this earlier, but a lot of the stats aren't actually totaled in your stats down here. Your character also still has hidden stats that are not displayed anywhere. The biggest one is your base damage reduction and your base evasion. These things vary wildly from class to class. Like there's like a 50 or 60 point delta between the lowest evasion class, Berserker, and the highest evasion classes, which I think are like Ninja and Kuno. There's like a massive amount of difference between your base stats, and you never get to see those. They're hidden. You get to see more stats on your gear than you used to, which is good. But honestly, who knows what other stuff is still hidden. We know at the bare minimum that there are class versus class modifiers that are hidden. So for example, warrior does 90% damage to, I'm just making up these numbers, these aren't the actual numbers, but warrior does like 90% damage to ninja, but 80% damage against kuno and 120% damage to guardian. Like there's these hidden multipliers that every single class has against every single other class, and the game never shows you them. You never see them anywhere. The only reason that we really know they exist is they were we kind of had a whiff of this when the data mine first came out. Like, hey, what is this table right here? These look like class modifiers, but it wasn't really confirmed. Eventually, the devs did a patch where they not only confirmed that their versus class modifiers are in the game, but they updated them and they put them in the patch notes, which is nice, I guess. Thanks for letting us know after all these years that this is in the game and that you changed it. But it's still, unless you go and dig up that patch from last year or the year before or whenever it was, you have no idea that that's in the game. Like, new players don't know that that's in the game until somebody explains it to them. And, like, it's unclear why that system even exists in the first place. Like, are they really such fine-tuned balancers that they know how much damage warrior should do to every other class down to, like, the percentage point? It's a really weird way of balancing to begin with. But even if we set that aside, like just the fact that they have systems like this that are in the game that are hidden, again, it's duct tape on top of duct tape, right? Like instead of just fixing class balance and lowering your damage modifiers in general, if you're a class that does too much damage, they're going to go through and be like, well, you're going to do 8% damage less against this guy and 5% damage less against this guy and 3% damage less against this guy. And like some of the matchups, people do like 50% damage to that class. There's no justification why you should do half your damage against just this one specific class. And only you. Like other classes get to do full damage, but just your class does 50% damage against just this one other class. There's no justification for that. It's crazy. So you have all these hidden stats. Oh my god, I have so many notes here. Like I don't know how I'm gonna get through all this, boys. I'm sorry for the 3-hour video, but like this is it, right? I'm getting my piece. This is it. Big and shiny, our Lord and Savior. The only reason why we know about half the stats in this game is because of Big and Shiny. Because him or players like him are going out and doing hundreds, if not thousands of hours of research, meticulously breaking down the formulas and figuring out how this stuff works. One of the things that he discovered is that damage reduction as a stat plateaus super hard at a certain point. So if you're somebody who is aiming to get as much damage reduction as possible, you are artificially nerfed at a certain DR score. I forget exactly where the plateau is, but basically once you have like above pin gear, damage reduction becomes significantly less effective. Whereas evasion, it's sort of the opposite. Evasion, like the higher your evasion rate is, the more people miss against you. It's actually more of like an exponential gain. So you have these very weird imbalanced systems. You have no way, if you're someone who's building for damage reduction, you have no way of knowing where that plateau is or how it's going to affect you unless you have like 15 PhDs in math and you do 5,000 hours of research like Big and Shiny has. There's this hidden plateau. You have no way of knowing about it. Even once you do read Big and Shiny's research and you start wrapping your head around it, it's still kind of hard to figure out like what you're supposed to do about it. And so you have all these hidden things that are in the game that you have no way of knowing about. And then that ties very closely into the lack of quality control. And the reason why that ties into lack of quality control is because when things in this game are broken, you don't know. When I eat a food and it gives me more accuracy, the accuracy doesn't show up here. So how do I know if that accuracy is actually being applied to my character? I don't. The only way I know is if Big and Shiny has tested it. And this has happened over and over and over again with the game, where items are broken, buffs are broken, and we don't know for months or years. It happened with accuracy in the original Syrindia meal. It was supposed to have 5. It actually had 1.25. Unclear to this day if that was a tooltip error or if that was a actual coding error. But nonetheless, the item was lying to you. The monster damage in the old cron food, it said that it gave you 30. It actually gave you something like 16. That was never fixed until that food was finally phased out and a new food was brought in. And then luckily, the new food did have the correct stats. You're leveling up your node for grinding. So if you go to a node, we'll go to my favorite OG node out here. You can level these up all the way to 10. And in the original version of the game, the developers told us, if you invest your energy into these nodes, then your drop rate will go up. It was broken for a very long time. At least the first year, maybe 2 years of the game. I forget exactly when they fixed it, but very, very long time, that did absolutely nothing. You would spend energy, which was a massive resource back then. It doesn't matter as much nowadays, but back then energy was super, super important. And you would spend thousands of energy leveling up these nodes, and it literally wouldn't do anything. And the devs refused to acknowledge this. So Big and Shiny, again, like he comes out with this crazy huge test where he's killing thousands and thousands of mobs, literally counting how many mobs he's killing and showing the drops that he's getting, and he's got like confidence intervals and like really doing the due diligence on the statistics and everything else to prove beyond a doubt that this stuff isn't in the game. And the devs, when confronted with this, are like, no, it's there, it's in the game, yeah, it works. What do you do with that? And then eventually they changed over to a different node, or they pretended to change to a new system. What they really did is they just added a system because there wasn't anything before then. So what they really did was they added a node system, but they pretended like they were changing it. There was a patch back in the day where they were like, okay, there's a new node system now where if you invest energy, then you get a 5% drop rate per level, but only on 10% of the things you kill. I don't know why it's that convoluted. I don't know why it's not just, a 0.5% per level. But when you level it up at level 10, you have a 50% drop rate on 10% of the mobs. So again, I don't know why it's not just a 5% drop rate on everything, but that's how they chose to do it. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's different than the last system, when again, in reality, they were just adding a system to begin with, and they never admitted or acknowledged that the thing had been broken for years before that, even though they told us many, many times that it was working. Here's a fun one. Succession Warrior has a skill called /. And this is more of a localization thing. This isn't really, I don't know how much of this is the dev's fault, but if you mouse over prime /, this says ultimate movement distance will decrease once you learn ultimate /. So if you're playing Succession Warrior for the first time and you're going through the prime skills and you see this and you say, oh, I get less distance when I learn ultimate /. Okay, well, obviously I'm going to go ahead and unlearn that then. I don't have an old moon book running, so I can't unlearn it. But yeah, basically, a lot of people who play Succession Warrior for the first time, they go through and they unlearn this skill, and it actually completely messes up your movement for Succession Warrior. What it should say is movement distance will increase once you learn ultimate /. The prime / gives you way more movements than the pre-awakened one. And the pre-awakened one, ironically, is really only usable if you have the ultimate version, because you need to cancel it with your block in order to spam it fast enough to like get down hills and stuff. So not only do you lose the movement bonus for prime /, you also lose the movement bonus for like the regular non-prime /. Like you just basically just ruin your movement by doing this. So like this isn't a small thing, and like I don't know, it's been reported a bunch of times. It's been in the game for a year and a half. I don't know why it's not fixed. But it's just like over and over again, there's these things in the game that don't work, and Pearl Abyss only finds out that they don't work because players do hundreds of hours of research. Here's another example. Crit damage on Blackstar. We recently found out that Blackstar weapons have 2% crit damage on them. Just wasn't showing up in the tooltip. Did the devs figure this out? No, the devs didn't figure this out. A very diligent player who was on the test server, who was paying close attention to the numbers he was getting, noticed, hey, there's something wrong here. We should test this further, and figured out that there was a 2% crit damage on Blackstar weapons that had been there apparently the whole time. And the devs came out with this statement saying, whoopsies, yeah, you're right. We're now going to go through and check every other item to make sure that they don't also have weird bonus stats. And they actually did find like other weird stats on like random green rings and stuff that they never knew was there. And it really makes you doubt the whole game and like if things are working, if an item that you work for months and months to upgrade actually has the stats that it's telling you that it has. Like my confidence in my gear in this game is just completely eroded. There is no quality control. There is no team of people testing or checking any of this stuff. They actually made a statement in their post about Blackstar weapons, something along the lines of, we're now going to make it so that the stats that are listed on the item are tied to the stats of the item. So before they weren't. You had the stats in the item, and you had a tooltip that somebody wrote separately from the stats in the item, and those things didn't talk to each other at all. So if you updated the stats on the item, the tooltip would stay the same, and then you would have to manually go through and change the tooltip. And so that just opened up the door for all these items to have incorrect stats on them, and no one would ever know. There's so many other times that this happened, you guys. Like when they added one of the original AP bonuses, I think it was from an adventure journal or something. The bonus AP that you were getting would show your AP bracket going up, but it wouldn't actually increase your AP bracket. It would only increase the tooltip description of your AP bracket. Your character would actually not do the extra damage that the game told you that you had. Was this discovered by the devs? Did they figure this out a week later and say, oh, in our internal testing, we discovered an issue with this week's patch? Again, no. A player who spent a ton of time researching this, an absurd amount of time researching this, is the one who discovered it and reported it. And half the reason these things get fixed is just because they get 800 upvotes on Reddit. Like, if you actually report this stuff through the ticketing system, it just gets ignored. You have to make a big, like, public, fuss about it for them to actually take notice and do something. Okay, so back on the topic of Shadow Arena. There was a tournament that was being held by Cacao back in the Cacao days, back in the Shadow Arena days. And I forget exactly the timeline here, so forgive me. But I think the tournament was like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday thing. And super fun tournament. It was, a bunch of the streamers were getting together and competing against each other in Shadow Arena. And so at first, Pearl Abyss had promised that there would be lobbies that we could use, private lobbies that we could use to fight against each other. And they told us, like, yeah, we got you. We're going to add private lobbies so that you can have this tournament. The private lobbies were not ready by the time the tournament came out, even though they were promised. So instead, Cacao had to pivot and make it so that the new tournament format was that everyone participating would just have to go pug. And then based on how you did in your pug games, based on how many kills you got and where you ranked, you would get points on that. And then, the person with the most points would win the tournament. So way less fun because you're not fighting directly against the other competitors. You're fighting against just kind of, any old person in Shadow Arena. So a bit of a weird format, but okay, they're still, Cacao's trying their best with what they have. And, this was back under Good Vibes Guy and Richter, like when they were trying super hard to, engage with the community. And so shout out to those guys. And in the middle of the tournament, after already screwing us over with the private lobby, some dev from Pearl Abyss managed to hotfix a game-breaking glitch into Shadow Arena on a Friday night that added the absolute version of Divider to Musa. And basically what that means is he added an ability to Musa that just one-shot everybody in Shadow Arena. Normally in Shadow Arena you had level 1 abilities, and this is like the level 10 like maxed out ability. You're not supposed to get that in Shadow Arena. And for some reason, even though the game patches on Wednesdays, or I guess now it's Tuesdays, but back then it was Wednesdays, for some reason, this game-breaking Shadow Arena glitch was hotfixed into the game on a Friday night mid-tournament. And when we reached out to Pearl Abyss to say, like, hey, we're in the middle of a tournament, can you undo that? bug that you just hot fixed in, they said, we're out of the office for the weekend. We're not here. We went home. Clearly, somebody was in the office because they managed to patch a game breaking bug into the live version of NA at like 10 p.m. on a Friday. But I guess they couldn't be bothered to go back and fix it afterwards. They'd already gone home by then. And so we had to wait till like Monday or Tuesday for the thing to get fixed. And by then, the tournament was like, it was just such a mess, dude. All this stuff combined, it makes you wonder, what is the process of new content being added to the game? What is the process of new items being added to the game? Who is looking at those things? And most importantly, what else is broken that we don't know about? There's got to be dozens of other things in this game that are broken that just haven't been discovered yet because of the amount of research that it takes for people to figure these things out. There's got to be classes with broken hidden stats. There's got to be display errors on items that still haven't been caught. There's got to be stuff that we haven't even fathomed yet, that we haven't even thought of, that's broken, right? Like, who knows? Maybe one of your characters has a broken enhancement rate. Like somebody who had a super unlucky streak and failed 100 times in a row, maybe your enhancement rate is literally bugged. Maybe it's literally showing you the wrong thing and you just don't know it because there's no quality control. There's no one testing these systems. There's no one affirming that these things are doing what they say they do. Like, it makes me so paranoid about the stuff that I do in this game, and it makes me feel like why am I working towards upgrades that might not even work, that might not even function the way that they're supposed to function? All right, so let's move on to the next category: incessant desync and other issues with PvP. The desync in this game is unreal. And, I mentioned Shadow Arena earlier and how that failed as a standalone. The main reason Shadow Arena failed as a standalone is because the game has a crazy amount of desync and no one wants to play a battle royale with desync. We put up with desync in this game because it's an MMO and there's a lot else going on. And when you die in a big fight, you respawn a little bit later and you go back and it sucks, but it's usually not enough to make you quit the game. Although over time it definitely makes you want to. But in a battle royale like Shadow Arena, if you're in the top 5 for that rounds and you catch someone with a skill and then they teleport out of your hands and end up behind you and your character rubber bands and you lose because of that, that really pisses you off, and then you just quit the game immediately. In BDO, when that happens, you're just like, oh, well, that's just it happens so often that you're just desensitized to it at this point. You just expect that half the time you grab someone, they're going to teleport out of your hands and your character's going to rubber band, or if you knock someone on the ground, they're going to lay here and then their character's going to slide on the ground over here, or the character's going to teleport on the ground over here. You just expect it to happen. After a while, you just kind of get desensitized to it. You don't really even feel anything anymore, just kind of this vague existential dread slowly seeping in, wondering why you're still playing this game after all these years. So yeah, that's pretty much what PvP is like in BDO. Even in very closed environments like the big Arena Varsha tournament that we just had, there was desync constantly. If you can go through and watch the fights from multiple perspectives. If you watch, for example, my perspective on my Warrior fights versus the announcer's perspective for the Warrior fights, you're watching two completely different fights. And that's true of anyone who streamed their fights. The game just isn't optimized for NA or EU servers. The game is clearly designed for people who live in Korea, who all, ping less than 10 and have crazy infrastructure, and, good for them. In Korea, honestly, the game works beautifully. I've seen it. I've played it over there. The first standalone Shadow Arena that we played in Korea worked beautifully because we were playing it on LAN. But once we start playing that online, it's garbage. And the devs don't understand this because they only ever test it in their own internal environment on their Korean servers. But someone in the NA offices needs to figure out a way to explain to the devs in Korea that the game is insanely broken everywhere else in the world and that your abilities just constantly don't work the way that they're supposed to. It's been a problem ever since pretty much Awakening was added to the game. The more movement and the more iframes and the more super armors and CCs are added to the game, the more chances for desync there are, and therefore the more noticeable it becomes. And so the other consequence of that is that when you get better and better and better at the game, desync happens. Desync is the result of your losses. It is the deciding factor in your fights more and more often. So think about it. When you're new to the game and you're fighting somebody, you're losing because you used the wrong skill at the wrong time, or you didn't recognize the animation they were doing, or you're standing in the wrong place. You made some kind of mistake, right? As you get better at the game, you're making less and less and less mistakes. So in theory, you should be winning more and more often, right? You go from a 30% win rate to 50% to 70%. Eventually, you have like a 99% win rate. You're just styling on kids. You know exactly what they're going to do. You're predicting everybody. You're executing your combos perfectly. You're untouchable, right? Wrong. What happens is you get up to that 60-70% win rate, and then you just can't get any higher than that, because a third of the time your skills are going to desync, and the person who is worse than you is just going to beat you anyways. I mean, like, go watch my fights against Hands. Hands is like 100 times better at Warrior than I am, and I'm killing him constantly. Why? Because on his screen, it looks different. And on my screen, I got him. On his screen, I'm a million miles away. But too bad, bro. Like, you know, the server said otherwise. And so I can score, you know, a bunch of W's that I don't deserve against one of the best Warriors in the game's history. We talked about this a little bit earlier. FPS in this game equals DPS. I mean, what else is there to say? The higher your FPS in the game, the more damage your skills do. That probably shouldn't be a thing. The siege meta in this game is overwhelmingly stale. There's only a handful of guilds that participate anymore. And the same class has been overpowered since the beginning of time. There's a myriad of other issues, but we'll just move on. The devs balance in this game based around KDA in red battlefields. They say this constantly, and it drives me crazy every time I read it. They'll talk about how, like, Wizard and Witch in red battlefields have, I think this was the quote they used, an only above average kill-death ratio. And that's the justification they use to not nerf them harder. During the last round of class balance changes, even though those two classes are like massively overrepresented in Siege. They're like 5 times more common than the next played classes, and all the data is there to indicate that they're extremely overtuned. But instead, the devs are going off of metrics like your kill death ratio in red battlefield, which is only above average. Now, kill death ratio in red battlefield is probably the worst possible way that you could analyze whether or not a class is strong or not. And if you don't think about it at all, then yeah, a class with a higher KDA is stronger. Sure, it kind of makes sense if you don't think about it at all. But if you do think about it, who's going into red battlefield and playing these classes? So you have Succession Wizard, for example, which is the overpowered meta class. So you have very highly skilled players going into red battlefield and cleaning up with that class. But who else is playing Succession Wizard? Every horrible bottom 10% garbage player who has no skill is also playing that class. Why? Because it's the meta class. And so you have these players who are going into RBF either to try the class out for the first time or to reroll to it just because it's meta and not because they're actually good at it. And they are going to drag the KDA of that class way, way, way down. Now, what's going to happen with a non-meta class? How many tamers are still left PvPing in large scale? Not that many. And if you are a tamer in a siege guild, what's your KDA going to be? It's going to be extremely high. Why is it going to be extremely high? Because if it's not, a siege guild wouldn't allow you to join them. You see how this works? The people who are actually still playing non-meta classes are very good at those classes, and therefore they are inflating the KDA. The classes that are meta, everyone, whether they're good or bad, whether they like the class or not, whether they've practiced the class or not, is playing that class because it's meta, and they're going to drag the KDA down. So you actually get the opposite results of what you should get if you're balancing around KDA. And you get, if you look at the KDA for Tamers in Siege or for Tamers in RBF, it's going to seem extremely high. And you're going to think, oh my God, Tamer's overpowered. We better nerf Tamer. When in reality, there's like 2 Tamers left in the server, and they're both God Tamers, because if they weren't God Tamers, they would be playing something else. They wouldn't be recruited into these guilds. They wouldn't be sieging in the first place. They wouldn't be allowed to siege in the first place. Like, they literally wouldn't get a spot, right? Okay. We've already talked about the karma system and how bad it is and how many solutions that they could implement to that. Right now, karma is basically just used to grief people. From what they're telegraphing about the upcoming bounding systems and stuff like that, it seems like this problem is going to get even worse. It seems like the devs are dead set on punishing people for doing world PvP. And again, I just wish, if they don't want world PvP to exist in this game, I wish that they would just make like instances for PvE players to go to, and then, you know, let those of us who do want PvP fight over the PvP areas, you know, like add more Arsha channels or something. I don't know. And then like turn PvP off on the non-Arsha channels. Like, I just don't get what their goal is. I just want them to pick one or the other. Do they want PvP in the world or not? And then design around that. Because right now it's like this weird in-between, and it just doesn't work, and it just leads to nothing but griefing. There's also a massive lack of clarity when it comes to PvP in this game. We've already talked about how misleading your stats on your items are, so it's very difficult to come up with an item build that makes any sense. You basically just have to copy someone else and hope that they know what they're talking about. The CC system in this game, which is extremely important if you actually want to kill someone to understand how that works, is not explained anywhere in the game. Again, you have to look up patch notes from like 2 years ago or even longer to understand what the CC limits are and what the rules are and how different CCs interact with each other. Or you have to go and watch like an external guide that somebody made on it. There's nothing in the game that tells you when, you know, what your CCs actually do or how long they last or how they interact with each other or when someone is CC capped. Some of the information that's given to you in PvP is just outright misleading. For example, if you do CC cap someone, meaning you stun them or you knock them down too many times in a row and they become immune, there's a message that pops up over their head that says immune when you try to CC them, which is, that in and of itself is good. It should say immune if they're immune. The problem with that is that there's also another way that people can avoid CC, which is through RNG resistances. That's a whole thing in and of itself, which the community is really not a fan of, including myself. But nonetheless, the game does have, what am I looking for? The game does have these RNG resistances. And so if someone grabs me, I have a 32% chance to resist that. Now, not really, because they have a lot of resist penetration, but knockdown is a better example. I have an 80% chance. If somebody has 30% resist penetration, there's a 50-50 chance that I'm going to resist their knockdown. So they're going to try to combo me with a knockdown or a bound, and it's just not going to work. Now, what happens when it doesn't work? The word immune pops up over my head. Now, in 1v1, you can, usually you're keeping track of how many CCs you've hit someone with, so it's not that big of a deal. You know if the immune means resist, and you know if the immune means CC cap. But in large scale, there's no way of knowing. There's no way of knowing if that person just resisted your knockdown, or if that person is literally capped and immune to CC for that window. So you actually can't make the proper decision of how to follow up with that person. Should you disengage and wait for their immunity to wear off? Or should you continue engaging and try to secure another CC because the first one was resisted? It says immune for both. Why does it say immune for both? Just make the CC cap say immune and make resist say resisted. It's a 2-second fix. All right, we have a few categories left. Congratulations if you made it this far. Enhancing an in-game progression needs a complete overhaul. So my biggest issue with in-game progression in BDO is that if I want to go for an upgrade, which for me right now is basically like pen accessory or pen blackstar, at minimum I need probably 200 fail stacks. Realistically, if I actually want to be efficient, I should aim for more like 250 to 280. It takes dozens of hours to build stacks like that every time I want to go for something. And the fail stacking system is just so long and tedious, and man, if I have the materials to make the attempt, just let me make the attempt. This one's a bit harder to fix. Like it's not, low-hanging fruit like a lot of the other things that we've discussed in this video, but it is fixable. I think the entire system should be overhauled so that fail stacks are item based rather than character based, and there would be some transitional pain that comes with that, but there's a way to smooth it over that it wouldn't be that bad. But I don't think they'll ever do that. So instead, my best recommendation for fixing enhancing is simply add more ways to transform your enhancing materials into stacks. Because essentially what you're doing when you build stacks is you're paying blackstones and memory fragments and that sort of thing in order to get a higher stack. You're failing on items using blackstones. You're repairing those using memory fragments or hards and sharps, etc. You're paying the concentrated stones. You're paying all those things in order to get the stack. But in addition to paying the materials, the problem with enhancing is that you're paying time and you're paying like just boringness. Like you're paying the price of just standing in town for hours, clicking the button over and over. And oh, that one went up. Okay, let's go reset it. And click, 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 click. And oh, that one went up too. Let's reset it. Okay, click, click, click. It's so unnecessary, man. Like all they have to do is just get rid of the whole reblath thing, have an NPC or a quest or something that you can do where you transform X amount of blackstones and concentrated stones and memory fragments, and you exchange them for a 30 stack or a 50 stack or a 100 stack or a 200 or a 300 or even more than that. Like make the costs extraordinarily high, but let someone trade their materials in for a 400 stack if they want to. Who cares? As long as you balance it right, as long as you do the numbers right, this is totally fine. This is not going to mess up the economy. The only thing that I could see being an issue is like maybe green items, since people still use those to repair. Like if someone's enhancing their Gruntle, or maybe like a Coom would be in a weird spot because people wouldn't have a reason to buy the bases anymore. Like some of the items that people use to fail stack on, there might be some weirdness there, but it's a small price to pay in order to save the system. So many people quit this game over enhancing. And I know the argument to this. The immediate knee-jerk argument is, well, just buy it. That's boring. I mean, yeah, sure, I could go grind and save up money and just buy my next upgrade. But I don't want to, man. Like, enhancing is one of the best parts of the game. It's one of the most exciting parts of the game. It's where some of my best and worst memories of the game come from. I want to feel the thrill of swinging for pin distortion earring, or pin blackstar. Like, for an end game player, that's one of the few things left that still, gives me that feeling. I don't want to just go save up money and buy it. And, the other thing is, like, just because there's an alternative, just because the buying alternative exists, that's not a justification for the baseline enhancing system being in such a shoddy state. Like, if you have a broken system and then you add an alternative, great. I'm glad the alternative exists, but the alternative doesn't justify the original broken system staying broken. You still got to fix that system, or you got to get rid of it. Like, you can't just leave broken stuff in the game and be like, oh, we'll just go do this other less interesting thing instead. I want to enhance my gear. I want to gamble for my gear. I want to blow stuff up. It's part of the BDO experience. It's been part of it since the beginning. It's core to my experience. I understand some people don't like it, and those of you who do like buying your gear, more power to you. But I shouldn't be forced to buy my gear, or my only other alternative is to stand in Velia for 65 hours every time I want to make a pin attempt. That's crazy. I have the materials. I have the wealth. I can afford to attempt to upgrade the item. I should just be able to do that. I shouldn't have to spend dozens of hours standing in town left-clicking on an NPC. What is that adding to the game? What is that adding to my experience? It just makes me want to quit. All right, next topic. Pearl Abyss doesn't prevent cheating, and neither does the community. It's a bit to unpack here. Cacao had said to me privately, I won't say who, but someone from Cacao had said to me back when Cacao was still running this, that it was hard to catch cheaters because of VPNs. Everyone uses a VPN nowadays. And I was kind of shocked when I heard that, because I worked for an MMO before doing customer service, and we would get reports of cheaters all the time, and it was actually very easy to determine who's cheating. You don't have to use IP address. It doesn't matter if someone's using a VPN. There's all kinds of things you can look at. There's their play patterns. There's their hardware IDs. I mean, like, if somebody is, and you can give them warnings too, and people will basically confess to you that you're cheating. Like, if you send someone a message saying like, hey, you've been caught for this. This is your 24-hour or your 48-hour ban. Don't do it again, or it's permanent. Usually they will say something like, yeah, you're right. You got me. I'm sorry. Or they'll confess in a different way. They'll say something like, what do you mean? I was on vacation, which is also a confession, because you look at their logs and it's like, from 12 p.m. to 8 p.m., they're playing from one hardware ID in one part of the game doing this one thing. And then from like 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., they're at a completely different hardware ID doing this other thing in a different part of the game. And then it goes back and forth every day for like a week. And it's like, yeah, bro, you didn't go on vacation for 7 days in a row for 8 hours at a time. Like, get out of here. You're banned. It's very easy to tell. And if there ever is any doubt, if you're ever genuinely not sure, then okay, like, err on the side of caution. I don't think they should just go and get ban happy, but like, the amount of stuff that people get away with in this game is honestly crazy. And using excuses like, well, they use VPNs, so we're not sure when somebody's paying someone else to play on their account. Come on. It's easy to tell. In 99% of cases, it's very easy to tell. And, the piloting and the paying other people to play your account, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's been some really egregious cheating that goes on in this game. There's been silver dupes. There's been people who rig enhancing rates. There's been people who, the biggest thing that have impacted the economy for a long time was speed hackers. People would basically teleport into Histria, speed hack, cooldown hack, instantly kill everything. They would have a macro that put their pets away and took them out to instantly reset the looting, which is like another exploit that people probably still do to this day. And that would make them loot faster. And like, that was destroying the economy for a long time. And it took like a year and a half for them to crack down on it at all. And it still exists, to a lesser extent. But like, if there is any cheating, it takes them way too long to respond to it. The responses are always way too lenient. There's always tons of people that get away with it. And like, frankly, at high end, the game's kind of a joke when it comes to the competitive scene. Like, if you do get banned for mostly the stuff that people are getting caught for now is piloting, right? It's like paying people to play their account. But there's people who do more egregious stuff than that. There's still people who bot and speed hack and cooldown hack and stuff like that. And even if you get banned for botting or hacking or something like that, you can just buy an account and literally use the same name. And not only will Pearl Abyss not take action against you, the community won't take action against you. Nearly all the top guilds have people who've been banned. Some of them have been banned twice for like really egregious things, like actually botting or like actually exploiting and cheating. And these top guilds just like it's their homie, they just welcome back in. No one cares. They go, they buy another account for a few grand. They change their name to be literally the same name as the one they got banned on, so everyone knows it's them. And they rejoin the same guild, and they're back at it. And then they look for a different way to cheat where they won't get caught as easily. And Pearl Abyss is very ineffective at stopping them. And the people who play this game at a high level more or less just think it's funny. And like, are they wrong at this point? Are they really wrong? Like, between all the greedy cash shop progress and all the cheating that people have gone away with, should we respect progress in the game at this point? Like, should guilds like that care if their friends cheat? I mean, I know I'm supposed to like virtue signal here and say, that these are all bad people and that like, I would never let my friends get away with it. But honestly, if I led one of those guilds and the game was in the state that it was in right now and someone got banned and they were like one of my close friends, I might let them back in. If it was 2016 BDO, I wouldn't, right? Like, if it was before Cronstones and all that stuff, I'd be like, yo, you're ruining the game. But what competitive scene is there left to ruin? Most of the top players are cheaters. Most of the top guilds have cheaters in them. Most of the top streamers are cheater apologists who continue to play with cheaters and act like it's not a problem and come up with different justifications for why, like, well, our enemy guild does it, so of course we're going to do it too. So that just creates a whole culture of like, honestly, why should you care? Why should you be the only one who's following the rules? And you've heard people say this. I mean, one of the GMs of one of the top guilds before he quit basically said exactly this. In the partner program to the devs, he basically told them like, look, for a long time, I told my guys, if I catch you doing this, I'm going to kick you from the guild. But months went by, a year went by, the guys we're fighting are doing this every day, every week. They're raking in massive amounts of silver, paying other people to play their accounts and doing these other cheats, and nothing is happening to them. At some point, I just have to give in and say, you know, who cares? Who cares now? Like, do whatever you want. And like, as much as I want to say I don't agree with that, I can see how people get worn down if the stuff isn't enforced and if the community doesn't care, and if you can be, a top community member in a top guild or a top streamer and get away with stuff and play with people and act like you're somehow above it and maintain your image. um I don't know, man. I don't know. I mean, it's Pearl Abyss's fault. It's also the community's fault. At this point, I think they I think they could crack down on it. I think they could get serious about actually stopping this stuff and assign a group of people to actually figure out who's cheating and who isn't. I mean, some of the stuff is blatant. Like when people were speed hacking in Histria, they would list like 100 items instantaneously on the market, and well, maybe not 100 because I think the cap was like 30, but they would list like all 30 items instantly on the market within less than a second. Like it's clear that they were just using a bot to go to Histria, farm the items, teleport to town, list the items, teleport back. It was so obvious. And they got away with this for months, more than a year before the first real crackdown happened. And, the people who are making these bots and hacks, they're always trying to get ahead of the curve. They're selling these bots and hacks, so they have a financial incentive to stay ahead of Pearl Abyss. And, I'm sorry. I know it costs money. I know it costs resources, but y'all have money. You have resources. You can afford to, do some countervailing here. You can afford to get some people to fight back against the hackers and take it out of the game. Or at the very least, you can take the problem of piloting more seriously, to where, somebody doesn't have to have a viral clip of literal video evidence of them piloting in order to get investigated and get banned. That seems to be the standard of evidence for anything to get done nowadays. And I think if Pearl Abyss took a harsher stance, and if a few key members of the community, particularly high-end streamers, also took a stance against this and refused to play with people who they knew were cheating. Like, none of this stuff is hidden, you guys. I mean, I can show you Discord screenshots. I can show you clips. Like, Big and Shiny has his little Naughty Naughty series where, he's got all these unlisted videos on YouTube. But if you ask him, he'll probably show you too. Like, there's plenty of evidence of people in top-end guilds cheating. Everyone knows they do it. Like, there's no way to hide. If you got banned for fish botting and you buy an account and you come back, like, people, like, they don't even hide it. They tell each other, like, yeah, bro, I got banned for fish botting. Like, send me a G invite. No one cares. No one in these guilds cares. It's just an accepted thing. So if you're their competition, how long are you going to care before you give up as well? That's tough. All right. Last thing I got here, ineffective partner program. The partner program, when we swapped over from Cacao to Pearl Abyss, I was hopeful. My initial impression from the guys in the partner program was these are guys who want to listen to us, and it's going to be different now. We have hope. We have a direct link to Pearl Abyss. It reminded me kind of back in the Xbox days where, like, I felt, since Xbox was self-published, in the Xbox partner program, I felt like really listened to in that program. I felt like my feedback was getting to the devs and the game was being, like, fixed when there was a big issue. The PC partner program is a hot mess. I can't really go into too much detail because technically I gave them an NDA about it, but it's basically like feedback theater. They sort of like, they aggregate our feedback and then they send it to the devs, but it's like very clear that the devs aren't reading it. or responding to it or acknowledging it in any way. It's just like, hey guys, thanks for your feedback. We'll be sure that that gets sent into the shredder over in Korea. Um, and I don't know. I don't really need to go into it further than that, but the only reason I mention it here is because, like I said, it was a big source of hope for me. Like, it was one of the things that I was kind of waiting to see on. Like, hey, maybe now that we're self-published, they'll actually start to listen, and some of the stuff will actually start to matter. And that kept me playing the game for a little longer. But it's been a few months now, and it's clear that like it, yeah, we they don't care. They got too many other people yelling at them. They don't need us yelling at them too. They don't care what we have to say, and it just is what it is. So, let's try to wrap this up. What is the game doing right? Combat. I mean, the combat, I think, continues to carry BDO. If the combat in this game wasn't so good, I think all the other issues would be much more glaring. But we constantly forgive this game because it just feels so good to blast things. And, like, I mean, Scars of Dusk, like, there's just nothing else like it. The combat is really, really fun. The PvP is really fun when it actually works, and when there's actually a point to do it. I think that's, the work that they did on like the new Hadoom spots and stuff like that was really cool. Those spots are fun to grind at. They feel new and different. The graphics of the game, as always, like it's a beautiful game. It's nice to just fly around on my Pegasus. I like the way the world looks. The artists in this game are amazing. The animators are amazing. There's so much talent at Pearl Abyss when it comes to like the combat and the arts. I just wish that they put that level of quality into all these other things that we were talking about. There are, some things that have been added to the game that I think were excellent starts that could be turning into something. Bartering was a great addition, but ultimately, like many other things that I mentioned in today's video, ruined by tedious daily chores that are unrelated to the skill itself that nobody wants to do. I think they're adding a new ship or something in the next update, or at least they've announced it. We'll see if it ever actually gets released. So, that's cool. Bartering is, one of those core systems that could be really cool if they actually update it and continue to work on it. Monos was the same way. Monos life skills was a great start. It revitalized some life skills. It completely killed some other life skills, and they sort of just didn't update it after that. It's just another neglected system. But if they would just keep going with some of the good ideas and just let go of some of the bad ones, the game has so much potential, so many different ways that it could be 10 times the game that it is now. And I think that's why I get so worked up and also so just like frustrated and exhausted when I talk about it, because like it's right there, like a bad game that has no chance of being bad. Who cares? Like, you play it, it's bad, you move on. But a bad game that's like 95% of the way to being good, and they could just do the last 5% and it would fix it, and they don't, it drives you crazy. And for me, the game's just been in that state for way too long. And, I'm not going to wait for that last 5% anymore. I hope someday that they discover it. I think what they need to do, honestly, I think this is what would fix the game. Every dev at Pearl Abyss needs to stop doing whatever they're doing, stop whatever they're working on, come into the office and just play BDO for 3 weeks. Just every task, every actual work, all the coding, everything they have to do, keep maintaining the servers or whatever, like the actual essential stuff. But all the developers, anyone who's in charge of content or making the game more fun, or like using the UI or any of this other stuff, just play the game for 3 weeks and see what you're drawn to. See what parts of the game you ignore. Think about why you're drawn to the things you're drawn to. Think about why you're ignoring the things you're ignoring. And just fix the things that are already in the game before adding more systems that are arriving in a state that is mostly incomplete and unfun. Like, just fix what you already have, and the game could flourish. Play the game, and then notice the things that we are trying to tell you, and then fix them. I really do think it's that simple. I think they all just need to take a big pause and just go play the game for a bit and just be a player. And I think the game could have a complete renaissance if they did that. So, I don't know, man. I hope they do. I really hope they do. But for the time being, I'm going to talk a little bit about the stream and where I'm headed. So, I've been streaming Final Fantasy XIV for the last few days. I'm having a lot of fun with it. I'm going to be doing that for at least the next few weeks. I'm going to go really hard. I could definitely see Final Fantasy XIV as like a long-term kind of home base that I go back to in between other MMOs, and so I think it could develop into something really good. It's much different from BDO. There's definitely some things I miss from BDO. There's also some things that FF14 does that I'm blown away by, like the production quality in that game. It really reaffirms some of the stuff that I see in other games, as far as like sometimes I wonder if I'm being too critical, like maybe it's just really hard to make an MMO. And then I look at how good of a job the Final Fantasy XIV devs do with just like the production quality and making everything work and making everything intuitive, and I'm like, no, you really can do it. You really can clean the game up if you take the time and put in the resources. So I've been really impressed with Final Fantasy XIV. I'm going to continue to play that. New Worlds will be fun for at least a couple months. It'll be a lot of fun for at least a couple months. I don't know if it'll last longer than that, but I'm looking forward to that. We've got the beta coming up at the end of July and then the launch at the end of August. And then I've definitely got my eye on Lost Ark. I'll probably make a separate video reviewing Lost Ark, Bless Unleashed, Crowfall, Final Fantasy XIV. What's the other one that I just said? Pretty much all the other games that I've, Aeon Classic. Like, I've been messing around with a lot of other games recently. I haven't gotten a chance to try Lost Ark yet. I'm waiting until the beta comes out of NDA, but I'll probably make another video that reviews those games. It won't be nearly as long as this one. We'll probably just do 3 minutes per game, just my first impression, maybe a little bit longer on the games that I've played longer. But I do think that the next 4 or 5 months is actually looking really good for the MMO genre for the first time in a few years. I feel that way. So I think we have a lot to do. And then on top of that, I am in the midst of sort of like rekindling my old passion for game dev. I've worked for a couple game dev companies in the past. I made my own mobile game with some friends here in San Diego. Some of you know about back in the day, called Cards and Castles, which was a fun little project that we made with basically like 5 people. And I think my buddy still maintains it and updates it from time to time. But I'm very interested in getting back into that. So I'm going to be tuning up my resume and maybe getting back into game dev. If the stream continues to go well with Final Fantasy XIV and other things, I'll definitely, stream until the end of time. I really love streaming. I miss feeling the way that I used to feel streaming, and I'm starting to feel that again with Final Fantasy XIV, and hopefully I can feel some of that with New World and Lost Ark. So if that's there and the community's there and people are having fun and I'm having fun, I'll stream forever. But in addition to that, I am interested in getting back into game design. There's a couple side projects that are starting to shape up into something, but also, if you're hiring, if you found anything useful in this 3-hour rant of mine, if you think that what I'm saying makes sense and that I might actually be able to bring some good ideas to the table, reach out to me. I want to start working on a game, I think, in addition to the stream. So hopefully later this year I can announce something along those lines. I think that's about it. This has gone on for way too long. If you actually watched the whole thing, congratulations. Sorry for being so ranty. I told myself I was going to stay calm and try to record this video and just keep it clean and concise, but it's just 5 years of feeling, man. So now it's all out there, and if you guys want to know what I think, there it all is. Thank you guys so much for the support that you gave me over the duration of this game. I hope some of you continue to hang out and come by as we play other stuff. But seriously, I can't say how much all the support means to me. Special shout out to, Tet and Mr. Pay and Nabron, Rum, I shouldn't start listing names because I'm going to leave people out. There's just been so many amazing people supported the stream over the years. Um, even just the OG subs, the new subs who gave my stream a chance, even though I feel like the last year of BDO streams have not been good. All you guys, it's amazing that you supported me for this long, despite all the ups and downs. And I think we're gonna have some real ups going forward. I think I can bring you guys some much better content than what I've brought over the last 12 to 18 months, and really make your support pay off. So I hope to see you around. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out. And take care.